Good morning. You're listening to Drinking Socially, the official Untappd podcast.
Your weekly look into what's happening in the Untappd community and the world of beer. This episode is brought to you by Untappd and the Untappd store. Use the coupon code podcast to get 20% off your next purchase.
Good morning, guys. I'm John, and I've always wanted to drink beer from a stovepipe. Not really. I don't think anyone's ever said that before. Hopefully I'm the first. But stovepipe cans, or you may know them as tall boys, they've been around in craft beer for a while now. I think most people would credit Oscar Blues debuting the can in Great American Beer Festival 8 years ago in 2012. What's the goal of a stovepipe? Hopefully we'll figure out or talk about it a little bit here on this episode. You can kind of view it as a replacement to a bomber or 22-ounce bottle. It's economical for a brewery. And really, there's a lot of beer in one can. Harrison, what's in our stovepipe today?
That's right. So we're going classic and enjoying Stone's IPA, their flagship. So the beer that built Stone, or one of them, I guess I should say. So I'm excited to, check this out. Some quick hits about it from the brewery itself. So beer's name is Stone IPA from Stone Brewing, of course. It's an American style IPA. Comes in at 6.9% ABV, 71 IBUs. And there's, as with most Stone beers, a nice long story back here about it. But in summation, by definition, an India Pale Ale is hoppier and higher in alcohol than its little brother Pale Ale, and we deliver in spades. Now one of the most well-respected and best-selling IPAs in the country, this golden beauty explodes with citrusy flavor and hop aroma, all perfectly balanced by subtle malt character. And they also note, and I've seen written many places, that hops in here are Magnum, Chinook, Centennial, possibly some others, but enough about that. Let's get in there. It looks like, John, you already have. Let's do some first sips. What are you thinking? What's happening?
I love when you intro the beer, Harrison, because normally it's the first thing I want to do when we're recording a podcast is taste it, and It's been a while. So for me, it tastes right. Drinking this beer, it tastes like 2012, maybe even 2010. It's a proper bitter. I get pine. I get a little grapefruit. You said Magnum, Chinook, and Centennial. Yeah. Perhaps it's changed. This beer's been made for a while, but this beer tastes like going back to when IPAs were bitter and sometimes scary. And it's comfortable. It feels good. It feels like, like the first time you were like, oh my God, I like IPAs now. Let me stop rambling. It's lighter than I thought at 7%. It's a little bit, it's light in mouthfeel and in carbonation, but it's got that punch, that piney, we'll say dank bitterness, 71 IBUs, and you can feel it in here. This is a grown man's beer, a grown person's beer. My apologies.
And I just took a couple hits straight from the can. Why not? But it's, Ooh, it is so. I knew I was going to get excited when we grabbed this. It's been a while since I've had this beer, but first sips are, as you said, dank, piney. It's very light bodied, but that just makes the hops like jump out even more, which is what I was hoping for. I was hoping it's going to be just a big kind of bitter punch in the face, which it pretty much is. And as we've spoken about on many a podcast, kind of nowadays harder and harder to come by just old school West Coast IPAs, when that's kind of what I grew up, in quotes, learning about beer by drinking crazy West Coast IPAs. So this is awesome, and it checks all those boxes that I hope. And it really does feel, like a bit of a time machine. You're kind of stepping back to a time when this was the question was, what can be more bitter, and not like what can be hazier and crazier.
Yes, we were talking about you and I the other day. Like, remember when you would see that beer get released from a number of breweries, and they'd be pushing for 100 IBUs.
Yep.
And I don't know scientifically if I could taste 100 IBUs, but I know coming in, Stone IPAs bring the heat in this beer, just like it is 5 years ago. And West Coast IPAs are prized for their clean, bitter finish.
Yeah. And when we look at the BJCP style guideline for American IPA, which is 21A for those following along at home, the overall impression is it should be a decidedly hoppy and bitter, moderately strong American pale ale, showcasing modern American or New World hop varieties. The balance is hop forward with a clean fermentation profile, dryish finish, clean supporting malt, allowing a creative range of hop character to shine through. So that's really, like, no surprise, an awesome description for many reasons. First of all, I mean, I think it's kind of like right in line with this beer. It is true to form, very pale and light in color, kind of like a straw color happening, but also super hop forward. And with like American hops, the hop character, it can range. I'm glad that doesn't say should be piney, should be grapefruity, should be whatever, because when you're hopping a beer like crazy with these kinds of hops, it could be any of those things and all be correct. All be in line with what you would expect an American IPA to taste like. So this is, perfect alignment as far as what I'm tasting and what I'm reading about this beer from the BJCP. This is, and no surprise. I mean, you could really argue that this beer may have influenced that description the BJCP uses for what an American IPA is. It's been around since, I believe, 1997, if not a little bit earlier. 97, this beer from them. So, hot dog.
Yeah, this is a beer, I think, you don't have to try hard to find Stone IPA. It might not be as prevalent as like Bell's Two Hearted,
right,
but all of them in that category, the category you just kind of walk through for BJCP, Stone IPA, Bell's Two Hearted, Firestone's Union Jack, like those are like classic. It's the most checked in beer style on Untappd is the American IPA,
right? No surprise.
And it's largely because it's accessible to everyone, and it's delicious, man.
It's really good. I love the dry. It's not just, and this is something I guess we should say, for me, I love these beers not just because they're super bitter, but also because the ones that I really like, they also finish very dry, which accentuates that bitterness. So it's almost like two different kinds of bitter experiences just punch you in the tongue. It's got that easy to find, definable hop bitterness, but the dryness almost just sucks the air out of your mouth too, and makes it even more bitter and intense. So I love that. That's what it's doing. And that was the old kind of joke about an IPA, is the bitterness, makes you want to take another sip to cleanse your palate of the beer, and then the bitterness returns. You want to take another sip. It's that never-ending circle that eventually ends with the beer being gone, and then you switch to a lager or a porter or whatever, and you got to get out of that little loop you're in if you want, or you just keep riding the lupulin train all night and until it comes off the rails. That's up to you. But yeah, this is, I knew it when we grabbed it. I was expecting this, and it delivered, and that's really cool when that happens. And it, in doing so, uncovers memories, thoughts, experiences right now that, again, that like dry bitterness, it's something special. And I'm going to keep drinking because I'm parched a little bit from the bitterness. Here we go again.
I would imagine if you're judging a bunch of these beers back to back, it like that's where the term palate fatigue probably originated. Yep. Maybe not, but drinking this beer and then comparing it with another beer of a similar makeup and style, there's the bitterness in here it's unrelenting. Like it makes me want to grab a piece of cheese or if I can be honest, some Doritos. But like it makes me want to eat something, and that bitterness should do a really good job kind of cleansing your palate so you don't get too cheesy or too hoppy.
There you go. Right. That nice dance, the dance of the cheese and the hops. I can get down with that.
That's
something, right?
Movie,
something,
sorry. Yeah.
Something, a play, maybe an opera. What is that in Italian? Somebody
dance
tweet us
cheese
that.
And hops.
Right.
Yeah.
That'd be a thing.
With Andrea Bocelli.
Oh man. You just paying to watch someone eat cheese and drink beer. That just make me sure. I'd like to be the restaurant next to that theater make a lot of money. But something else to note about Stone IPA, that if you read any articles with Greg from Stone kind of talking about this beer, it does not have Cascade hops in it, like on purpose. It kind of, long story short, Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale was like taken off, which of course features Cascade hops, and they were like, we don't want to do that. We want to do something a little bit different, but kind of entice those fans of that beer to kind of see our version of it. And so they don't have any Cascade in here. If you're, the grapefruit we're getting is definitely coming from the Centennial and the Chinook, and maybe a bit of the Magnum. But that was a cool, a conscious decision they made, was like to not do, even at the time, was kind of obviously exciting to be brewing like hop forward beers in the 90s, but not a lot of people were doing that, to, at that exciting moment, kind of pick their own path and say, we're not going to use this hop everybody else is kind of falling in love with. We're going to try and define Stone's own space in the kind of bitter American IPA world, and did so with this beer and with some hops that just weren't as popular as Cascade was at the time. So I know it's something they really kind of pride themselves with, and as they should. It's an awesome combo. Chinook is so cool. It's such an aggressive, like bitter, dirty, earthy hop that also has like a little bit of grapefruit in there. So I'm getting all that right now. This is a blast.
And so one of the things, we picked this beer out for many reasons. If you see Stone IPA on the shelf, if you think about it like I do most of the time, you think like, all right, I'm familiar with that beer. I want something new. And I don't think anyone can blame you for that. But I'm always amazed when we go back to one of these kind of core beers, how you're just like instantly like, damn, this is like drinking with an old friend or drinking an old friend. But one of the reasons we picked it is because we wanted to talk about Stovepipes on this show, which is coming up in just in a couple of minutes on Beer 101. But Harrison, I talked about it a little bit in the intro, but from your experience, what do you think of when you think of a stovepipe or a tall boy can?
So this right here, this is the perfect grill timer for a bunch of burgers. That's what this is. This is it. One of these, right? You crack it when you drop the burgers on the grill, and when you're done with this beer, flip it halfway through, flip the burgers halfway through the beer. When you're done, the burgers are done. Because it wasn't this beer. It was actually BFD, I think is what it's called.
Beer for drinking,
from Sierra Nevada, which is like a 4% golden ale they did a couple of years ago that only was available in Stovepipes. And that summer, it was like clockwork. If we were doing burgers every Friday, it was grab the BFD, burgers on the grill, crack it. When it was gone, I was ready to, serve dinner to everybody. So that's what I think of first. When I look at this beer, is it's a natural barbecue timer for burgers. Obviously, depends on your grill. Know your grill well first. That's step number one of any great barbecuer, is know your tools and your instruments. But you can get it dialed in to make it work with the stovepipe right here. I don't doubt it. What about you, John? Do you have any kind of thoughts or experiences when you look at a stovepipe? What comes to mind?
Yeah, usually I love your idea about using it as a grill timer is perfect, man. Because for so many reasons, that's perfection. When I look at a stovepipe can, my first thought is like kayaking or going for a hike, because I'm usually, I'm going out of town. So I'm stopping at like the last gas station before the dirt road. And I'm looking for like Founders All Day or Dogfish does Sequench, something in a tall boy can that I can just shove into a backpack, maybe grab two of them. Yeah. It's kayaking, it's fine. Right. But it makes me kind of think of like going on an adventure. Yep. And there's a lot of fun to be had with that. And I'm going to use that poorly to transition into one talking point I have before we get to Beer 101, which is Untappd announcements. And so from Mama Untappd, those of you that watch the show and follow social media, should have been yesterday, you saw we're announcing our first European beer festival. Hey, Harrison, if you're French when you go into the bathroom and you're Italian when you come out of the bathroom, what are you when you're in the bathroom?
European, John, of course.
I'm pretty sure I learned that joke in 1992 and I still love it.
Back of the bus.
That's a good one. Outside of poor jokes, Untappd's launching a virtual European Beer Fest. Tickets went on sale yesterday and end on November 2nd. The festival is going to be a weekend, November 14th and 15th. Mm-hmm. And the way it's going to work is we're partnering with beer merchants. So those of you that listen in the UK or in areas of Europe should be familiar with them. There's 3 different boxes of beer you can elect to purchase and follow along with this festival. There's like hoppy. There's a hoppy box. There's an adventure box. Don't quote me on them. Go to the links in the show notes. If you're in Europe and you're available to get a shipment from beer merchants, Greg's going to be there. There might be a special guest spot for me and Harrison as well virtually because that's cheaper than getting to Europe. And honestly, I don't even think I'm allowed there right now.
Right.
But check out the notes for the show, especially for those of you that listen in Europe. Don't get me wrong. I'm jealous of all the beers that you guys get to drink over there. Yes, Jack's Abbey is going to be participating.
Ooh, cool.
They're one of our favorite breweries from last year's Oktoberfest. Other Half, if you haven't heard of them, pretty big deal. Other Half's going to be participating. Oh, yeah. But also like Lervig, Omnipolo, Puala, all my favorite breweries. And so there's going to be some really cool beer. Beer Merchants is going to link you up with the beer. Untappd is going to put together a big virtual event, just like we did here in the States back in June. And I'm really excited. I'm jealous that I won't be able to get most of the beer, but I'm really excited to kind of see some of you guys from across the pond and drink a beer virtually with you.
Likewise. It's going to be a blast. Tickets on sale, guys. Go check it out, and we'll see you there.
You know what it's time for now, Harrison?
I think I do. It's been long enough. I should know when you say that it's time to put on my thinking cap and
finish up your stovepipe.
That's right.
We're talking about packaging in this Beer 101. It's the 9th in what's going to be our 10-part series. So we're getting close to the finish. And kind of chronologically, we started with the ingredients that go into a beer, what you do with those ingredients, how long should you leave it in your closet. And now it's getting to the point where you might want to package it up and give it to friends, or you might be curious, where's the journey for getting that beer to the grocery store shelf.
Right.
So this Beer 101, the theme is packaging. We're drinking from Tall Boys, and I've got Harrison on the block with 5 questions to answer from your experience as a brewer and your experience as a drinker. Mm-hmm. Starting with, it's the 9th episode, which kind of makes it a little bit scary, but we've only got one of these left, and I've loved this series. But we're at the point, so the beer is leaving the brewery.
Yeah.
My first question, naively, is what's packaging look like at a brewery? Is it like a special, like we always package on Wednesday and wear your cool shoes? It's going to be a really exciting packaging day, or is it kind of part of like business as usual?
Yeah, great question to start, because it's at different breweries. It's been a different experience. The first production brewery I worked at, it was pretty much we bottled every Friday, and that was kind of all hands on deck. If you were doing sales, you did get it done early because you had to be at the brewery at 11 or noon or whatever. If you weren't doing sales, get there as soon as you can to make boxes and move pallets of empty bottles and so on. And that was at Thimble Island really in like the first year they existed. So it was like early days, and we were kind of self-distributing, scaling quickly. So it was sustainable to just kind of bottle everything on a Friday, but it really was kind of like an all hands on deck situation. We were getting new pieces of equipment like almost every month, where we would add it to the the bottling line. So like, and then like almost each time you came in, you were like learning how to do a whole new thing, whether it was like a depalletizer, which is how you get the bottles like off the pallet into the actual bottling line. We got I think it was like a 12 head bottle filler, which is, they're huge. That was like an amazing piece of machinery. And when we got that whole experience, I was there the day we set it up, like the first time, and ran all the tests, and it was like looking at it was like NASA's stuff. There's all these robots in there and lasers and sensors, and you got to, X, Y, and Z. It was wild. It was, the book to like the game with the instruction book was amazing. It was 100,000 pages long probably, and not just in English. It wasn't even like the one for your chair that's in 20 languages, and it's still only about 5 pages. So anyway, moving to Neshaminy Creek though, when I got there, they were kind of more they were already in 4 states and had a lot of demand. So it was pretty much every day it was every day you were either kegging something, bottling something, or canning something. And honestly, they were some of my favorite days, packaging days, for a lot of reasons. If I was on the packaging team, I was you really only have 2 roles, and it's kind of making sure the cans that are getting filled are filling properly, or the kind of more grunt work of when the cans come off the line and they need to be packed into a case. You're doing that, and then moving kind of cases onto a pallet to be wrapped and shipped. So it was very, like, the whole system was obviously very automated, and a lot of those days I kind of felt like a robot, where I was really just doing like 3 things again and again all day, just kind of like, put this here, pick it up, turn around, put it down, put this here, pick it up, turn around, put it down, and do that for hours. So we just make the best of it though. It sounds monotonous, but it was awesome, especially if you came from like a month of doing cellar work or brewing, where it's a little more, I guess, mentally exhausting. This one, you still obviously had to be super aware. Spatial awareness is it's really important in a brewery with, forklifts zipping around and people handling chemicals and stuff all the time. You want to know what's going on, but it was one of those days where you could kind of crank up some awesome 80s hair metal and just kind of just zone out and zone in at the same time at what you were doing, which is really just kind of a couple of tasks at once in repetition all day, and try to get done as quickly as possible, because usually on packaging, when you finished your line, you were done. So if you kind of could power through it accurately, maybe you got off a little bit early that day to go to the tap room and then drink a lot of the beer you just can. So it was always a blast, and I was lucky to be on that shift with a lot of cool people too, where it was just fun. A lot of podcasts, a lot of music, and then
nice.
Just kind of packaging a lot of beers, which is it's great. It was very enjoyable, but again, for a different reason than maybe any other job you had at the brewery.
And so that kind of takes away like the joyful glee of like Christmas Day, packaging day at a brewery. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a much more realistic explanation of how it works. And this might be kind of trivial, but if you're listening to this show, at least you can get beer out of a stovepipe can, mm-hmm. A 12-ounce can, a 16-ounce can, a 750 ml bottle, a 6-still keg, a half barrel. You can get growlers and crowlers and 6-packs and variety 12s.
Yep.
So, like, what type of thought goes into? If you're a brewer, you're just like, I'm doing cans. I like cans better. Is it a decision like based on the beer? What is it? Is it just we have cans left, let's use it? What type of thought goes into what you're packaging into?
Sure. That's kind of a wild web, and I'll try to give the short version of it, because you're right. I mean, for us, when I got there, there was already demand. So really at that point, at Neshaminy Creek specifically, we had a bunch of distributors, and they said, hey, we need X, Y, and Z amount of all these beers by this day. And so we kind of built our production schedule on what was already kind of needed in the markets we were in. And then again, did they need draft? Did they need cans? Are we doing a cool bottle release out of the tap room? Like, all of those decisions were made above me, and really like outside of our control. Like, if our IPA was flying to New Jersey, then it was, I need 5 pallets next week, or, or as soon as you can get them to us. And great. When it comes to early decisions, though, about kind of like cans versus bottles and why do cans, we did mostly cans. And at that time, it was because they were cheaper than bottles. And there were a lot of businesses in the US, startups really, that were built around that, kind of providing for smaller breweries that were growing access to cans where you didn't have to buy like a million at a time. You kind of, grow, it would grow with you. And so there was just more flexibility when it came to the can market and suppliers and partners that we could find that were creating cans and doing, and wrapping them before we with the labels before we got them. So cans was an easy decision. Also, it's really the preferred vessel. I mean, we've talked about this before, but it'll keep your beer fresher longer than a bottle will. Most of the time. That's a whole other discussion though. But yeah, so, and then, but really demand, it was kind of like, what is needed? Is it draft? Is it cans? And we let the market we got to a point where we're very lucky where the market kind of told us how much we needed of each, vessel filled, and could just fill those orders and get it done.
And so, that's already like kind of more clarity. Again, I'm viewing this mainly from a drinker, a beer buyer.
Right.
And I'm wondering, like, is it like a dartboard where it's can or bottle? And
Right.
There's probably some breweries out there that do that, and I want to visit you on packaging day. But so far, at least in recent memory, canning seems to have kind of become the favorite for most craft brewers nowadays. And you're right, like it's light sealed, it's good to sit on for a while, it fits on a shelf easy.
Yeah.
So when it comes to canning, what is it like? Is it just like on How Is It Made, where there's just a line of cans running down and there's beer flowing in and you just seam a lid on the top of it? Is it, please tell me there's more nuance than that.
Yeah, there's many more places where you can make a horrible mistake that takes up half your day. Like moving those cans from the floor just in storage into the depalletizer, and doing that through a forklift. At Chamonix Creek, the depalletizer was right next to about a room that was about a foot higher than the room we were in, that had just a slope up to it, like 40-degree ramp. And you would have to go in there with a forklift and scoop them up and get those cans down that ramp into the depalletizer without all of those cans falling on the ground. Which it's happened. It happened and it was to no fault of sometimes it was just, the hydraulics and the forklift would like bump for some reason, trying to calibrate because it sensed it was going down a slight decline, and then it would try to jerk up, and then you'd have like 10,000 cans fall on the ground. So that happened. Not a lot. There are ways around it, but every once in a while, when you saw some guy, not do what you were supposed to secure the cans because he wanted to get on there quickly, everybody kind of stopped and went, is he doing this? And half the time it worked, half the time it didn't. And then we just kind of heard like it was like metallic snow or a metallic waterfall in the back of the brew house, and then someone, holy cheese and rice, yelling out loud, a lot of colorful language. So
lots of cheese and rice.
Anyway, that didn't happen a lot, but that was right. It's kind of some of the things. It's always in the back of your head of like, if that happens and that's 40 minutes now of everyone's day, like you're 40 minutes behind and like you're messing up the next shift. So there was always that kind of urgency of like, be as perfect as you can be. Because canning had a lot of small moving pieces like that, like an element where you had to get the cans into the palletizer first. And you really had to do everything in order for anything to happen. So it wasn't like you could do that later and I'll start filling the cans that don't exist yet. Obviously it had to happen all at once. So But yeah, so you put the cans into the palletizer, you got to sanitize the cans, then you fill them, you put the lid on them. Usually you'd have a fob, which is called a foam on beer, FOB. It stands for foam on beer. It would shoot a little CO2. It's just a hose. It shoots a little CO2 into the beer right after it's filled, before the lid's dropped on it, to kind of shoot some CO2 out of that beer, out of suspension, so that if there was any like air or oxygen sitting on the top of that beer, the CO2 and the foam would knock it out. So before you put that lid on, it was just beer and CO2 in there. It's a really cool process to see, but it's like very simple. It's just a little hose that shoots a little bit of foam out of the beer. So that happens. And lid it, seam it. It goes into what's called a pack text. Those really cool plastic can holders. Everyone I'm sure knows. You get a 4-pack or a 6-pack, and what holds the can together. Most are made by a company called PackTech, and that's a cool machine that just slides across the cans and slaps it on at once. I was lucky to have one of those. If you've watched any brewery on Instagram that's starting out, you probably see them posting images or videos of 5 guys at a table with a bunch of single cans slapping on PackTechs in person. That's very real. But there is a machine that also does it. So and then grabbing that 4-pack or 6-pack and throwing it in a case and stacking it. So again, there's more to that. That's kind of the quick high level of it, but yes, there's again lots of little moving pieces where it kind of all has to be going right and in line, and you're constantly measuring, is this beer full enough? Is this flowing correctly? Is there any air in the lines? It is a lot to manage. If you are the person really in charge of the canning line, but if you're the guy grabbing the cases and stacking them, that's the day when you're like, whoo, put on the Eddie money. Let's just hang out and chill. But yeah, so it's a lot. It's just a lot of moving pieces, like anything else in the brewery. But at the end of the day, right, you are essentially just filling it and seaming it, and
with a whole bunch of nuance and room for error. Somewhere in the middle of that story, I was reminded of a saying I learned in the military. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And
there you go.
I envision like the same thing. Like, look, man, we need to go fast, but if we make a mistake, we're all going to be working late tonight.
That's right.
Which is like, it's a delicate battle of probably every moment of most people's lives, which is why we all need to drink beer.
That's right. Stovepipe beer.
Exactly. Give me the biggest
ones.
can you've got.
I think we should try and rename this, John, like like a 2020 small or something, like a Stovepipe. Steven, get that to trend. This is just your
coping
minimum
size, the dealing with 2020 size.
That's right.
Yep. I almost thought I wasn't going to make it through the whole thing in a quick show, but here we are getting towards the end of my beer. I've still got another question for you. You kind of touched on it when you said like Instagram posts of a whole bunch of guys just like slapping those can holders. I mean, I have them in my fridge right now, and I'm not too proud to say that's the biggest pain in the butt of grabbing a beer out of the fridge when it's in that 6 or 4-pack holder. Yep. I got to grab the whole thing and kind of like wrestle it away like I'm on the bomb squad.
Right.
But I'm grateful that we now have switched to like plastic friendly ones that I can recycle and aren't going to go into the ocean.
Yep.
Anyways, a little rant.
Good.
Our last show for Beer 101, the next one that we end up doing is going to be about marketing.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think of for marketing is like beer labels. We've talked about it before. I mean, there's brewers I can think of that, their art jumps off the shelf and you can recognize it like a Wes Anderson film, Stone Brewing, the Gargoyle. Yep. And I always kind of envision like that's the intern job. Like we just canned 150,000 beers. Half of them are pale ale, half of them are IPA. Don't mess it up and wrap the labels on them. Please tell me it's a little more organized than that for most people.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, for us, all the beers we got, they came pre-wraps. We had, I think probably about 6 flagship beers, and then we had, seasonals that we obviously planned in advance so we could get the artwork out to, the company that was actually wrapping the cans with the labels itself before we even got them. So yeah, we were fortunate most of the time that's what was going on. Now we did a lot of brewery only releases and limited releases and stuff too. And so for the cans, what we did was we also would bottle a lot of our barrel aged stuff. We would grab the labeler from the bottler and kind of like hack it into a labeler that worked for cans, which worked okay. It was like 60% of the time it worked all the time. It really, because cans
that's another military thing.
Yeah. So because cans can sweat, like it's very seasonally dependent, which is maybe something you don't think about being in a building inside. Maybe you think you control your own environment. Really, you don't. You're always at the mercy, like the ambient air. And so, yeah, like a lot of the times, if we were canning and trying to label something on the spot in the summer, you fill the beer first with the actual liquid, and then because otherwise the labeler would crush an empty can because it's pressing a sticker up against it. If it doesn't have beer in it, it's just going to smash it. So it needs to have beer in it, and that beer is like 28, 29 degrees. It's very cold. As soon as that, hits the air and you seam it, it's going to start sweating. So, and the labeler was literally the next thing it hit. But sometimes it would just get like, if we're doing it for the middle of the day, it would just start sweating and stickers would not stick or fall off or flip or get crimped. So those were a lot of the times, those were like some of the best days to work at a brewery, because you would get 20 beers with horrible labels on it that were perfectly fine. You could grab and take home that night. So, the kind of a little bit of crumbs for the guys in the salt mines actually making it happen. But yeah. So you had the flexibility. We did anyway. You still had to obviously get that artwork out to a printer, and they had to get it back to you. So all this requires lead time, but luckily so does beer. So, when you make a beer, you're waiting at minimum 16 days from brewing it to packaging it. It's usually longer though. So you usually have enough time from the day you drop that recipe to be like, all right, this is what we're making. You need to design it, and by tomorrow or at the end of weeks, we can get it out to this guy so they can make it in time. So all that has to, a lot of planning goes into this, especially if you're doing a label art each time you make a beer. But of course, as we've all seen, there are plenty of breweries that have kind of like a cool taproom series generic label they can throw a name on that kind of frees you up a little bit. We didn't do that while I was there. Everything was very much like, actually, it shouldn't, anything we can. We never did for something we canned. There were plenty of stuff that we knew was going to be draft only that we, didn't need to worry about a label. But anything that was getting canned, it was very well thought out. Although since then, like most breweries, Neshaminy Creek's kind of cranking out even more new stuff. So, and canning a lot of it right now. So they've also kind of adopted that universal label for a lot of their beers, and it's great from production side to be able to, again, not have, the printer gets sick or the artist on vacation or again, all those things and kind of break down in your system. Don't have to worry about it. No, I can just throw this label on it and print out something that looks nice and you're good.
You put your brewery's brand on there, it's recognizable, and you eliminate some of the variables that might slow you down. Because I said this already in this episode, sometimes I just want a beer that I haven't had before.
Sure.
I've had plenty of good ones, but you're always kind of looking for that next
thing, sure.
Next beer that you have. I don't know. It's what makes it fun for me, at least. You Absolutely. Chase your own journey. Last question for you, Harrison.
Yeah.
And I just want to talk about home brewing, right? Like if you're a home brewer and you've got a canning line and a labeler,
good on you.
Sell your beer. You've already spent too much money on it. You're someone that you love is mad at you about wasting the whole tax return on a canning line. So what about home brewing? Any advice or kind of like special things to look out for when I'm taking that glass giant bucket out of my closet for the first time since I've remembered it was there, and I want to put it in cans or bottles probably for Christmas presents?
There you go. So yeah, if you're putting it in bottles, I would say don't do that. Get some corny kegs, because the bottling or invest in some really great comfy knee pads, because bottling homebrew beer, the first time I did it, I didn't even think about like the kind of physical tax it would take. And this is a 20 whatever year old me. It just kind of hunched over late on a Friday night doing bottle by bottle, and I still remember like how much my back was cramping and being like, I can't stop. Like, I've created a siphon of this beer into this bottle like racker. I need to go till it's gone. There's no breaks for me. So yeah, it's an arduous process. It's great because you're bottling your own beer, and that's exciting. But I would recommend as soon as possible kind of moving to corny kegs or kind of like soda kegs. It's what soda used to be served in for. Now it all comes in kind of, if you're at a restaurant, like plastic bags usually is what's hooked up to that soda machine. But it used to be aluminum kegs called corny kegs, Cornelius kegs. And they're that's the best way to go. Get a kegging system. It's not as crazy as an investment as a canning line either. It'd definitely be much more reasonable and easier on your back and your knees. If you're going to bottle, though, and give it out for Christmas presents, that's really cool, too. Quick pro tip, get 22-ounce bottles, not 12-ounce. Cut your time work in half, basically. Fill up bombers. And then you're probably being told to use some kind of priming sugar before you bottle those beers. To carbonate them, you have to add some new sugar to it to reactivate that yeast so that it makes CO2 again into the bottle. We've talked about this before. Doesn't need to be just corn sugar or table sugar, though. I've used maple syrup. I've used honey. Really kind of like anything fermentable within reason.
Scoop of grape jelly.
Right. Yeah. I wouldn't do that, but who knows? Maybe you discover the next slushy thing, or maybe you make some weird fungus that blinds all your friends. Hopefully not that. But Victory Brewing. So moving away from brewing quickly, Victory, they're known, or it is known anyway by some people, that they use a lot of their Belgian yeast, which is in Golden Monkey and a lot of their other kind of Belgian inspired beers, to can and bottle condition almost all their beers. Even if it's not a Belgian beer, that's how they're getting kind of that awesome, mouthfeel and great carbonation you experience drinking Victory beer, is from a little bit of Belgian yeast shooting in there and just taking care of carbon that thing up. So there are many ways to do it, but really just mentally prepare and physically prepare if you're going to bottle for that experience. Overall, as always, relax, don't worry, have a home brew and invest in some kegs, because your back will be happy. And it's also cool to just be in your house and pour a keg, draft your own beer. It's a very I don't know, you feel like you're standing on top of a mountain. You've just kind of conquered something great and mastered old world,
you created something.
And right, yeah, new technology all together, right? Your oatmeal's alive, and now it's making this rerun of SNL even funnier than it was originally.
I think that's probably incredibly sound advice. As I myself am aging, do less work but enjoy your home brews as much as you can.
That's right.
And so I'm going to wrap up this episode 23. I want to let you guys know that the next episode you're listening to next Wednesday is about pumpkins, or in this case, pumpkins. If you can still find it, look for Dogfish Head's Pumpkin Ale. It's the second most checked in pumpkin beer on Untappd this year, and we're going to be drinking it on the next episode and talking about all things pumpkin. Quick reminder, this episode has been brought to you by Untappd and the Untappd merch store. If you're feeling up to it and you want to buy a really cool hat as a Halloween present for yourself, check out store.untappd.com. When you find something you like, use that coupon code podcast and it'll save you 20%.
Wonderful. And as always, show notes for this episode will be available at podcast.untappd.com or untappd.com/podcast. And if you have any questions or feedback, please connect with us with Untappd, rather, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, directly with us on Twitter at That Beer Podcast, and then also directly on Facebook at facebook.com/drinking socially. That's our group, open to all. A lot of awesome posts recently, so we're getting to kind of the beer drinking weather, if you will. A lot of cool things going on there, which we'll cover a little bit more next episode, I'm sure. But other than that,
we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Cheers.
Cheers.